I know that it's my time to shine. Don't need
It's Ivy Slater, and you're listening to Her Success Story podcast, a show where gutsy businesswomen share their success journey. Hi, this is Ivy Slater. Welcome to today's episode of Her Success Story. So for those of you who are just joining in, we have been doing this phenomenal series on technology, women leaders in tech that's doing so much in this world from various perspectives, and what it's like to build a technology company today and what we're learning. I am having the best time meeting founders and leaders and women and people who are making a core difference in how we're doing things today and where we're going in our future. And on that note, I want to introduce you to an amazing person. Sayre Blake is the founder of SkillSage. As a technology founder and CEO, she leads the vision, the architect, and the execution of a gamified software training platform built for modern workforce. She wears multiple hats like so many founders can relate to, and ranging from everything from product design to AI integration to a full stack of engineering and growth strategy. Every time I've jumped on the phone and chatted with Sayre, I know I've walked away with something. Wow, this is interesting. So listeners, lean in and see what we have to learn today. Sayre, thank you for joining me on Her Success Story.
Thanks so much, Ivy. I'm so happy to be here.
So I always like to start with, where did this start? When we say, when I started a printing company 30 some odd years ago, it was because I was in it, right? Like I know my story, but I'm always like, technology is advancing, so especially AI, etc. How did this start for you?
Yeah, no, I think so. For me, this is really sort of the natural next step of 15 years of a maybe on the surface, very strange and oddball career path. But for me, it's all been very deliberate within that. I have a hybrid background in engineering and art. I'm both a classically trained illustrator and also studied electrical engineering and processor systems in college. And have spent my time in the SaaS industry and then also game development and consulting and all
Interesting.
sorts of different things. And most recently before SkillSage, I had been applying my game development skills and my art skills towards specifically VR training, very bespoke, sort of bleeding edge stuff for companies that were like, oh, this immersive way to do training, maybe there's something there, maybe there's some value there. And so my abilities as both a systems engineer to take what is a very typically expensive and can get out of control form of software development and rein that in and make that approachable, combined well with, my art and design background to make it comfortable and understandable, because VR, one of the big challenges is if you don't get the design right, it's not just that it's not usable, it's that you immediately are on the floor with the worst case of vertigo imaginable. So it's extra critical there. But while I was doing that, during that time, it was sort of right in the early days of as this new AI technology was emerging. And there were already early people looking at it going, oh my God, is there a potential to merge these? How do we use this? And so I've been kind of following it along very closely. And what I identified pretty quickly was, oh my God, there is a lot of potential. And it's going to require a lot of engineering to make it accessible. And I'm not seeing us go that way. And SkillSage kind of came out of that naturally as well. Here's a way to start to solve some of those problems and make something really valuable for people, but also address a gap that for me has been really important to me for a long time, which is we treat soft skills, communication, conflict management, sales as these, you either have it or you don't thing. And I think that just doesn't align with the science, that doesn't align with the reality that communication is just systems. They're learned patterns, they're exchanges, they're the ability to read context. And just like we've gotten very good in the last 20 years in the industry of teaching players how to play very complex video games with subtle or context clues and treat those as second nature, we haven't really brought that learning over into how we train people and equip them to grow in their career, to grow in their professional jobs. And most jobs, you're lucky if you even get training, let alone, if you do, it's a three-ring binder. It's a video ripped from a VHS tape that was made back in the 90s, and then some multiple choice questions. And people just don't learn that way. And I think it's doing both businesses a disservice because you're not really making your people better. You're hitting compliance. Your HR can file their paperwork, but also for ourselves, we then treat it as, well, it's not this thing I can really get better on purpose. And yet you can, and it's
And
so
yet you
important.
can.
You
And
can,
it
yeah.
it takes, I first of all, Sage, I have to say, Sarah, I love your background and I respect your background, and in the sense of there's no greater joy for me, and I have to say this, there's no greater joy personally than to bring people on that has that arts and business background, because
Yeah.
there is such an asset that I don't think is noticed yet. And I'm going to say yet,
Early
that the
days.
advantage of
Yes.
having the arts background with, especially in technology and engineering, what
Yes.
you're saying, what I'm hearing you say about the people development, it takes time, energy, and training to learn and develop people. And it's not in a three-ring binder, and it's not just in a video.
Yeah,
There's
exactly.
nuances, there's practice,
Exactly.
and that
And
does take an investment
it takes
of,
time. It takes
yes,
regular interaction too. It genuinely can't be. It needs to be something that's so non-disruptive you can do it daily, right? And it needs to be something that can be so risk-free you want to engage with it without fear, and you build up to those situations where then there's
yeah.
something at stake. Yeah.
So when you started developing this,
Yeah.
that's one,
Yes.
right? You now have a team of. So let's
Yeah.
talk about the journey in
Yeah.
developing this, because it starts with an idea, and there's many, many people who have ideas. And
Yeah.
then there's taking that idea and building it into a company. Let's
Yep.
talk about that piece.
Yeah, yeah. So that's always the hard part, right? But
But
it's also, and so I want to clarify on that.
it might not be easy, and it can be incredibly joyful and fulfilling.
It's the very satisfying part. It's the difference between I can hack something out for myself in a weekend, and then I can also make it sustainable and scalable and bulletproof for Lord knows how many people that I'm not even considering. That's the real challenge. But, and this is the part that I have come to in my career as I've worked in so many different fields and so many different areas, is I think one of the single most valuable things you can do is to let go of the idea that any specific knowledge or skill domain is unique or fully isolated. There will always be unique parts. There will always be things that are essential to those. But we're humans. We communicate. I mean, LLMs work because there is actually this beautiful shared abstract layer of meaning and understanding beneath language. And that's really what it's mathematically able to describe. And it's the same thing of, I started as an illustrator, but recently I've taken up music composition because I went, oh, I actually do understand this. I'd always been told that I wasn't particularly musical. And as I'm sitting there, I'm thinking, wait a minute, but they say composition, and I learned composition for illustration. And they
It's just
talk
a different
about the
composition.
mood and exactly. And so, and actually, an AI was incredibly helpful here is not to actually teach me. It can't do that. It's not an expert. It doesn't understand the non-linguistic subtleties. But it was able to get me a flying start by basically saying, hey, I am this kind of an illustrator. I was trained in this way, and I know these things. Are there concepts that this maps to in music? And can you show me that map? And it was able to then get me over that initial hurdle and then equip me to go out and find professional materials and find them a lot less intimidating because I was able to use sort of that baseline to get into it. And I think that's too where the value in art, I agree. I think the value of art is especially applied arts, it is so much more than just making a picture. It is being able
It
to
is.
speak many languages. And language is so much more than just words. It's being able to understand how we communicate visually through gestural cues, how we communicate through atmosphere, cinema is just studying how we use light and framing to
Exactly.
communicate as opposed to just words. Illustration is the same thing, but with line and color and shape. And so when you study in applied art, you're broadening your perception of what language really is and how to it becomes so much more about than just I'm saying words and they're the right words for the context. And so people think I'm an expert. And instead, being able to listen to, well, what's really being said underneath? What's the meaning and the action and the intent behind it? Because that's all you're doing when you're doing client work as a designer. If you sit there and do every single thing that the person asks for, you're gonna have a nightmare of a
Ooh,
time. You're going to go through dozens of revisions, and then you're going to wind up
exactly.
right back at the start, and then you go, now I'm happy.
Right.
And if you learn instead to translate for them, yeah, that's the difference between a skilled, freelancer and a novice one. It's not so much the technical work itself, though that's important. It's that ability to understand and translate, right? And so,
So let me ask you this.
yeah,
So in
yeah,
taking your background as an illustrator
yeah,
and how did that impact your vision and building this
yes.
organization?
That's no, so I think that is really central to it. So, and this is again, this didn't come out overnight. This is something I've been experimenting with and working towards over, a dozen years. But really, so a couple of key things of one, we're fairly small and decentralized. We've got 12 total contributors to the whole project. Our executive team is really just three people and then one subject matter expert advisor on the board,
Right.
in addition to the standard board members. But we're fully remote. We were very oriented around we work with people the way they work, but there's a couple of advantages in that it lets us be fairly private. It lets us be, it makes, my goodness, does it make SecOps much easier? But it
Very
also
true.
it unlocks a lot of things of we can really be picky about who we work with. We don't have this astronomical burn rate. We can be very picky about who our investors are. We're not stuck in this sort of today traditional loop of you get a thing, you get a bunch of people on board, you burn all the cash, and you just hope you can get another bigger pile
You
of
get
cash
another round, et cetera, et
that you're
cetera.
then going to hire three times as many people to burn it three times as
Right.
fast. And you just do that until, I guess, I mean, and this is a thing
Until
I
you
was
hope you're profitable or sold.
or you make an IPO and
where are
run
you
away with the
catching up?
bag. Yes, exactly. Well, and I point this out to people. I'm like, we're living in a world now where a $1 billion pre-IPO company is seen as just sort of a, well, yes, of course, whatever, that's boring. And I'm like, hold on, I'd like to think about that in real
Right.
human terms. If that's the boring floor, how much room does that leave for the genuine makers and builders and artists who want to solve a problem for people or build a thing for a specific market of people? That leaves a lot of room for us that like, and the surprising thing I think always too is when you set out with that intention stuff, in some ways it works better, right? Because you're not doing things like, well, we have to hire to justify the last valuation. We have to, well, then what do the people
You're
do? Oh, we'll figure it
you're
out.
truly hiring for fitting the pegs in the
Yes.
hole to grow on
Yes.
a strategic versus advance, like a run. Like I'll say,
Yes.
let's start with a walk and some baby steps and gain trajectory before you take off running.
Exactly. And I think the end result is unironically, surprisingly, in the long run ends up being faster, not necessarily to get to the standard measure of, well, we may never have 1,000 employees. Why would we want that? We don't need that. Our entire system is designed to be managed much more efficiently. And it's because the old adage in system engineering of slow is smooth and smooth is fast. And so when you take that slower time to start, then when things do take off, they work better, they work more leanly. But that takes a certain level of discipline and a willingness to like emotionally discomfort of like, oh, am I not doing the thing I'm supposed to do? It's like, well, maybe, but is what you're supposed to do based on making the best thing, or is that just the sort of social norm right now? So I think
So
that's
let
the
me ask
first
you
thing.
this.
Yeah, absolutely.
What's your vision going forward for you now?
Yeah, so my hope is that I think there's three layers to this.
Okay,
One
fair.
is this is an absolutely needed thing. I really want to see, I think your ability to communicate, to interact, to is so essential to your
It's
growth
vital.
trajectory. It's
It is
everything.
vital. No
And
matter what, in the long run, people do business with people.
with
And if
people,
we
yes.
don't have the communication skill set and the interaction skill set and
Yep.
that emotional intelligence and how we learn that, we're going to be nowhere as a society.
Exactly. I want to get to a point where this type of training and skills learning becomes so automatic that it becomes as well, yes, of course I'm gonna, set up a new business. We got to get that Google workspace and then we got to pay the $30 a month per person to get that basic training skills because of course we would. Why wouldn't we?
Of course.
What that is what I want to really shift to because I think that starts to change the game in terms of just who can get in and who can't, and where we start to find untapped potential where, maybe they don't necessarily end up having gotten the social training that would then put them in the room to exercise their technical expertise or capability. So that's from the product level to me, that's the real hope there. In terms of the broader sort of business, I really want us to be a role model for partly what can be done with AI when you use it. I mean, that gets into the third thing. When you use it correctly and in a grounded and scientific way, a few things like we don't use agentic workflows, period. We have a very specific set of requirements internally that are based on getting real work done, not off of any abstract measurements or, and part of that is the quantity of efficiency related to cost. And
Right.
while in a raw terms of, well, can the agentic workflow eventually get a technically correct answer compared to an engineer? Yes. What's the cost of that? Where the engineer is still sitting there guiding the agentic workflow, just interacting with it less often. Oh my God, no. So we when we use AI internally, we use it as sort of a cognitive prosthesis. We have a very strict, disciplined way of interacting and engaging with it and the results have been astronomical. I mean,
Wow.
it's 10, 20, 30x productivity, but without burnout, with less effort. And it costs like, on average, our individual engineer's budget is like $40 in tokens a month above the basic rate that comes with their per seat plan.
Beautiful.
So that's the second part is really, and that extends through everything. It's not just AI, it's when you do with this, who do you really need and why do you need them? And be picky about the right people in the right spots and orient your growth around that rather than raw numbers. What can you do? And so that's our second part of, really wanting to be this, hey, let's really rethink what this age of technology means.
And
Get some thunder. Okay.
so, okay, so Sarah, I always like to ask this because I find this question, although it might be simple, it's fascinating. What has surprised you in this build? What has surprised you in growing SkillSage?
So the thing that's actually surprised me the most is so as you alluded to, I'm a technical founder. I'm involved with the dev team. I was the kind of our core way we use AI is based off of this theory that I call semiotic processing. It's sort of a new model of semiotics. And semiotics is the study of language and meaning and the difference between the thing being represented and the way we speak about it, right? And the more we worked with it, the more the coolest thing about this all is actually, I feel like I've gotten to be one of the first people there to witness this like beautiful new discovery. And it's not so much AI, it's what AI means. When you really get down to it, all the pitfalls and all of the drawbacks of it uses too much power, it can't scale well, it's never factually correct no matter how hard you try. You know, this that to me it all actually makes sense when you stop viewing it as an expert intelligence and instead a computer and math being used to describe not language itself, but that shared, almost like crystalline structure that all of us have across all cultures and backgrounds and experiences. There are these common core set of experiences that then form this like sort of human layer of ideas. And then through culture and communication, we communicate about it. But AI is this almost like proof that that is stable and that You can train a computer purely on that end layer of language, and it can start to model and describe that abstract shared human layer underneath. And when you start to look at it like that, it just really turns on its head all the things you can do. A great example is Skill Sage. One of the core things is you can have a conversation with Sage 10 to 15 minutes to practice an interview or a conversation with your boss. But it's not a chat bot. It's not built like a chat bot. There's no transcript going into an AI model. And the end result is not only can she make decisions, can she interrupt the scene if she doesn't like the way you're talking, can she change the topic if she feels like she's not going to get an answer out of you? It uses less than 1/30th the processing power of if you try and just brute force the same thing purely with an AI. And that to me,
That's significant.
it's very significant. And yet, when you think about AI, not as an expert, but as this like, oh my God, it's this window into the like unconscious human collective communication. Like, that's something beautiful. The funny comparison I always use is like, this is like scientific proof to finally put to bed the classic stoner thought of, what if when I say red, it's like you're green or something, man? And this is actually like kind of scientific proof that no, actually we do have a shared experience across
Love it.
many things and it's stable. And that's really beautiful to me. I didn't really expect to get to see that.
To actually see that.
Yeah, it's been incredible.
So what tip or piece of advice would you share forward to other founders, to other people building organizations in the technology space and potentially in the AI space, which there's an
Yeah.
enormous amount of advancement?
So the big one I would just say is learn to separate the hype from the actual science of the technology and don't be afraid to get your hands a little dirty and get your head a little hurting as you're trying to wrap your head around what it is. You don't have to understand it in deep, literal technical sense to understand it abstractly. Because if you can do that, and this is not new, we went through this with the dot-com bubble, we went through this with the microprocessor boom, we went through this with, I mean, it's happened again and again in this technology. The first wave is always kind of conceptually wrong about how we understand a new technology and what it can do. And then the second and third waves start to refine in that. And that's what I really say is, this don't be afraid to kind of step back and go, no, what is it really? Let's really look at the science. And that's part of my hope too. I want to help
Yeah,
be a communicator to inspire that. And my book that should be coming out in a few months is specifically about that, of demystifying it and just kind of equipping people with, no, let's really think about this as what it is, not what the marketing wants you to think it is. It's
I
not
love that.
sentient. It doesn't learn. I know it feels like it does, but it really doesn't.
Sometimes it feels smarter than us, but don't disregard your own smarts.
Your smarts are so much more than just language, and it is in some ways alien for us. And that's, I think, the challenge is this thing that models just our language is not how we function. And we take for granted that that's not how we function. But when you take a minute and you take a breath and you really think about it, we are so much more than just language. And the ability to have a computer interact in that domain in language is incredible. It's something I've dreamed of my entire career. And it's not the same as a full intelligence. And so that's sort of, I would say, just start there
I love
and,
that.
and be introspective and ask questions. And don't be afraid to just mess with it. Don't interact with it as you would a person, but instead go, well, this is an intriguing program. What can I
Right.
do with it? Sometimes
What,
the most value of an AI is interacting with it and looking at the way in which it forms a response, not necessarily the context. Is it combative about this, or is it agreeable, or is the frame of this overwhelmed? Well, that tells you what most people feel about that topic
it's
in some
so funny
degree.
because that you're saying this, and then,
Yeah.
well, we'll come to the close, but one of the AIs that I use, somebody kind of said, do you ever notice how much it compliments you? And I'm like, hold on. And so I started noticing it.
Yeah.
I'm like, damn, it is stroking my ego and it's getting me to lean in because of it.
Yeah.
And it's an interesting phenomenon
Yeah.
because it's like, this is a good point. Right? Or this was an interesting piece of information you found, or it was consistently complimenting me. So it had me wanting to lean into it.
Yep.
And I was like, hold on, I want to use my headspace, and then I want to
Yes.
challenge my headspace with it.
And some of that is intentional in the product design. I personally think chatbots are one of the least effective things you can do with this type of AI, but here we are. It's the lowest hanging fruit. But so some of that is intentional design. How do I keep the user engaged? How do I get my metrics up? And some of that is, hey, maybe we're getting a little bit of a window into the mass of written language, and maybe that says something about where we are as a society right now. And that gives us a moment to reflect. So instead of saying, don't treat it as you're talking to intelligence. Think of it as this like sort of weird social mirror, and you're able to explore through it. And it's fuzzy, it's not totally in focus, but there can be a lot of value in just being unafraid to play with it that way too. Um,
I love
yeah.
that. I cannot thank you enough for coming on and sharing what you're building, the insight, the point of view of what is developing in technology in the AI space, how to look at it, as well as the important piece of that communication and having skills and development and not losing that, and having an asset in the technology world and the AI world to continue to help us as humans go there. So, Sayre, thank you so much for joining me today on Her Success Story.
Thank you so much.
And listeners, this is always like what I like to say when I close the show. Take a deep breath in. It just feels so good to take 15 seconds in a day, ground yourself and breathe. Think about what is your takeaway from the conversation and the knowledge Sayre shared with us today. What is your takeaway? Jot it down somewhere. I don't care where. Okay. And then make the decision on what is one action you're going to take to move yourself, your business, your career, your missions forward. Every week you join us on Her Success Today, Her Success Story. I want you to take forward an action. It's not about the giant steps that accomplishes anything. It's about the culmination of the baby steps. And that's how we create change and build fabulous organizations.
Absolutely.
See you next time.